For more information about upcoming episodes, to drop a suggestion, or anything in between, visit www.historyshortspodcast.com/HTTP. Or you can look for us on Facebook at History Teachers Talking Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. New episodes drop the 13th of every month. History Teachers Talking is part of the History Shorts Network. Now back to the show. This is Peter,
And this is Tom.
and you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcast. This is Peter Zablocki and Tom Reszka, and welcome back to the show. What are we doing today, Tommy?
Well, today we're going to look at kind of another countdown style of moments that made America. 250 years in 20 events is what we're going to be kind of looking at here. And we're going to do is a two-part, right, Pete?
Yeah,
That's the
definitely.
plan here. So we'll do the first 10 or the first 10 today, and we'll pop in and do another 10 later on in honor of the 250th anniversary of America. That's going to be coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah. And as you said, when I was putting this together, you said we need to have honorable mentions. And I love that idea because
Yeah,
there's a
there's so many
lot.
that are so close. Yeah, it's like I was going back and forth on which ones we were going to put down also. So we're going to do the first 125 years today, the next 125 years the next time we meet.
Yeah. The American experiment at 250. There's so many events. And as I was doing this, I didn't want this to be like a textbook list of going chapter to chapter. I wanted it to pop in, pop out. And obviously this thing's going to be, it's probably, we're always finished within an hour at most. So some things we're going to concentrate a lot more on than others kind of thing here. But essentially, as Tom said, right, this is going to be events that ultimately made America. We're going to be running through the United States first 125 years today, and then we'll hit up the next 125 years in the next episode. That's the goal. So
The
it's like a
goal, yeah,
crash course.
yes,
Crash
basically.
course. Yeah,
Definitely
that's
a
right.
crash course, yeah.
Yeah,
We'll probably
history
get
teachers
copyrighted
talking
for.
crash course.
Yeah, we'll get copyrighted for. John Green's not going to be happy, but
John's gonna be happy. I'm gonna have to
if
reach out.
if he actually hears about us, yeah, we'll say.
We'll reach out.
Yeah.
All right, Tommy, get us started, man. We start at the beginning. The
Well, we're going to start
beginning.
at the beginning, and we're not. Some honorable mentions didn't make the pre-America, but we're starting at the beginning of America, right? So we're starting at 1776, right? So basically, starting with the Declaration of Independence. Why it made America? Because America officially declares itself a new nation. But kind of the question I had for you, Pete, with this is: did America begin with a military victory, or does it begin with an idea? So that's just something we have to like go back and forth on here.
Okay. I always looked at the American Revolutionary War as two things that were happening at the same time. American Revolution, rather. You have the Revolutionary War and you have the Revolution, right? Like one is
Yeah.
taking the Enlightenment ideals and trying to create a functioning government based off of that, right? You're almost taking Enlightenment philosophy and trying to make it concrete. That's the revolutionary part, breaking away from government. And then you have to fight a war in order to make that possible. But if the war and the battles and the turning points within it don't happen, I don't think you have the revolution. I don't think
Well,
that's
that's the whole point. Yeah,
successful.
but what's more important though was the Declaration more important than winning the revolution? Because without the Declaration, do you have the push for the revolution? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
that's kind of
mean,
like a debate that because July 4th, 1776, Continental Congress adopts the Declaration, breaking away from Great Britain, based on those ideas like you're talking about the Enlightenment, national rights, equality, self-government, all that stuff we've always heard about. But without that declaration, does the revolution have something to really gather behind?
yeah, no. So I would say I would definitely say the Declaration of Independence is the key here, right?
Yes, that's a
Um,
starting point.
it's definitely a starting point. You and I talked about before we click recorded, we could go back to Mayflower, and I think that could be an honorable mention and
Yeah,
Jamestown
Plymouth
founding
Rock,
because
Jamestown, all
again, it
those.
all builds up on one another. However, indisputably, the beginning, because this is a blueprint in a sense, right? Your Declaration of Independence is that first event. The signing of the Declaration of Independence is that big first event that makes America because it literally creates a blueprint from why we exist in the first place, right? So,
Yeah,
like,
well, yeah. It
boom,
creates those
here it
founding
is.
ideas instead of just a reality. You know
Yep.
what I mean? It makes it it makes it true, and it's really those ideas that have lasted for another 250 years.
And then you have to
Yep.
fight for it. So the
Fight for it, yeah.
Revolutionary War is such a broad topic, but if
It's
you had
huge.
to pick out from the Revolutionary War, so independence is declared, right? Key. That's our page one of this American experiment. what comes next that allows this to come to fruition? Well, if you had to look at the entire war, what event, because there's so many that are considered turning
Well,
points,
there's
right?
so many,
Like,
and that was really well. So we go into event number two here. Is that what you're trying to
yeah,
do?
I guess you could, right?
All right.
Because I mean,
So
that
you
still
have
fits in
you
this.
have the Declaration of Independence first, right? Which is probably the most influential document in world history. I'll make that
Yeah.
argument. I'm an American. I'm going to say it. Okay. People can, yeah, whatever. It's the most probably the most influential document in world history. But what really kind of makes that document or makes the reality of that document come true is then the Battle of Yorktown. Right. I
Yeah.
would that was number two on my list that I
Wouldn't you
put
say
down. So
Saratoga though? I feel like Saratoga, because think about Yorktown. When you imagine Yorktown, I always think of the
Yorktown. All
Patriot.
right. I
And I think
yeah.
of the Navy coming in and they're all boxed in, but the Navy's French. And if there
Well,
is no
that's the whole thing. Yeah, but
Saratoga,
that's the whole thing about when the French actually they were supplying troops, they were giving us weapons stuff when they actually get there, right? When
oh, true.
Cornwallis gets cornered between Washington's troops and the French fleet, that's it. He's done. Not
Yeah,
as
yeah,
British Army surrenders. Yes, the war goes on for another couple of years, but it's kind of like that's when they knew that's it. Remember, they were playing that song, "The World Turned Upside Down," right
yeah,
there. And Cornwallis in the movie, he says, like, everything will change. Everything has changed.
yeah.
With debate whether or not he actually said something like that. But
Honestly, I love that movie anyway.
I'd say, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just do. I Braveheart is definitely much worse when it comes to movies that are flawed. I mean, the whole premise of Wallace winning the battle in Braveheart was like it was the battle of some bridge, and there's literally no bridge in the movie whatsoever. But the whole point of that big battle. However, The Patriot, I'm a big fan. I used to show that in class all the
Yeah, yeah.
time.
Yeah, there's a lot of
And
good
can
parts.
you still show that in class? I feel like now it might be considered too
There's
violent or
actually
something.
there's probably like better clips and stuff that History Channel's put together. I can like go some of
Yeah.
those things a little better. I don't think
Yeah.
the students really know who Mel Gibson is that much
Yeah,
anymore.
that's true.
So it kind of like made that kind of a little bit more
The
difficult.
novelty, it wore
Yeah,
off. It's like, "Oh,
kind of wore off a little
Hollywood."
bit. This is definitely a major event in American history because it effectively wins the revolution. The
Yeah.
revolution is won at Yorktown. There's other battles that escape, Washington crossing the Delaware, all those things like that that become iconic, but none of those matter if they don't win at Yorktown.
So, when I was, doing this research, right, and looking at this, it got me thinking because the next thing I would jump to would be the Constitution. It's the
Yeah,
natural
I would jump to that.
progression.
Yeah, yeah.
However, when you start looking at it, like, would you say that the Constitution was a fulfillment of the revolutionary ideals, or was it the opposite, was a retreat from it, right? Because you
Well,
may
yeah,
argue, I
yeah,
mean, a lot of people have
yeah,
argued
yeah,
that the
yeah, yeah.
Constitution betrayed what we just talked about.
Yeah, because the whole point is it gave power, right? So a lot like many Americans initially opposed the Constitution. That's what people don't understand. They kind of talk about, oh, the Constitution was needed and things like that because our confederations were so weak, but they were kind of designed to be weak, right? Because they didn't want that monarchy to rise to power. Again, I mean, the Constitution was that whole thing with federal power for state rights, which leads into some other conflicts down the road. But it gives that idea of the checks and balances, like that genius idea of checks and balances, and that is American. Like that's an American ideal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it creates Congress, it creates the Supreme Court, it creates all the executive branch with the presidency, which becomes the most known person on the planet nowadays. So you can't talk about major events or major things in the United States without having the Constitution as one of them, which becomes ratified what in 1787, 1788. So
Yeah. But I also say when you think of the Constitution, I mean, Article 1 is Congress. The founding fathers, at least as far as I read it, never meant for the president to
no, no,
be
well, yeah, we've always
what
talked
it
about that
is,
before.
the
That's always
presidency.
something that we always talk about. Sorry to talk over here, but that's one of
Yeah.
those things that is always talked about, right? When I taught AP Gov, that was one of the major things we talked about is that the president was more supposed to be kind of like a figurehead type of position. Well, you see a lot of other countries, right? A lot of European countries that have a president, they're not really like the big, you
Yeah,
know,
not like
the
the day to
power
day.
base.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
power base that we have really the modern day presidency really doesn't start to what the Great Depression and FDR. I think we've talked about that
Yeah.
before. You've had a couple major power players before that. Obviously,
Jackson,
that
obviously, but
Jackson's
yeah.
probably the biggest one,
But then
right?
it dips real hard, which
That
is why
yeah,
we
then
have
it did
forgotten
because people
presidents.
didn't like the fact that he was kind of acting like that, and really doesn't executive branch really doesn't expand again until 1939 with Eisenhower. I mean, not excuse 1930 what
You got
with
me.
Roosevelt,
Yeah.
and really it doesn't. But then it keeps on getting stronger every year since then. Like
Yeah.
now, the
No, that's for
executive
sure.
branch is by far the most powerful of all the branches. When it was supposed to be Congress, was always supposed to be the most powerful.
I came across an article looking at this that the real are trying to argue that the real founding of our nation was not 1776, but 1789. That it was Constitutions ratified, the Federalists, Anti-Federalists come to it and they agree. and
That's more.
America truly starts then.
I would say what we consider America starts then, right?
Yeah.
Because before that, we were under the Articles of Federation. But the birthplace of what led to that does start obviously with the Revolution, Declaration of Independence. That's why it's celebrated on July 4th, right? Every year. But you don't have the Constitution without the Declaration of Independence
Well,
prior.
yeah, because then it would just be British, yeah. I
Exactly.
mean, that's the thing, it's like, people
But I
forget
would
that.
say American government. I would definitely say American
Yes.
government starts with the ratification of the Constitution.
Yeah. Because the Declaration of Independence ultimately creates, you may argue, 13 independent states, independent
Yeah,
from Britain,
yeah,
but
yeah.
also independent from one another. Like,
Yeah, they
this
were gonna
wasn't
have
like,
trade
"Ooh,
and things like that.
America."
No, it's more of like it was a confederation. That's why it was called the
Yeah,
Articles of Confederation. That's all it was. It was a confederation.
yeah. Alright, so what do you have on the next one? Because mine kinda jumps based on what I was looking at. Mine would jump to 1803, which we did Louisiana Purchase. Did you have
Yes,
any
that's
of that?
I had the same one there. So yeah,
Okay.
1803 Louisiana Purchase, because this is what also creates kind of the what ushers in Manifest Destiny down the line,
Yeah.
things of that nature. So America buys the Louisiana Territory from France, right? Thomas Jefferson, and he's looking to see even in the Constitution, is this constitutionally valid? Right? I think we've
Yeah.
talked about this in one of our
Yeah.
archive videos about the he was saying, well, even if it isn't, this is just too good of a deal
Yeah,
to pass up.
15,000,000? That's how much
And that's
houses cost now.
and that's kind of like a American ideal too. All right, maybe it's not the right thing to do, or maybe it's not legal, but it's too good of a deal. It's too good. It's going to benefit. It's going to have too many other benefits. So if it's kind of a gray area, okay, and which it was because it doubles the size of the U.S. overnight, right? Costs about what, like you said, 3 cents per acre, about
Yeah,
$50 million.
dude, it doubles the
So
country
yeah, it's one of
overnight.
the greatest land deals ever. Napoleon basically accidentally creates a future superpower at this point.
Well, there's so many things here behind
The
the
scenes,
main
yeah,
event, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because when you think of the Louisiana Purchase, first of all, it sets a blueprint for Western expansion, period, right?
We do it
Like,
without it. We can't do it
yeah,
without it.
yeah. From that point forward, all right, now we have all this land. How do we deal with this land? How do we acquire land? Can Congress buy land? It sets a blueprint for going forward in land acquisition. But also, there's that little hidden point here that the reason why Napoleon really needed the money and needed to sell Louisiana is because of Toussaint's revolution in Haiti. That revolution, Napoleon thought he was going to just get in there and
Yeah,
overthrow everybody in Haiti. But Toussaint's revolution makes it so difficult for Napoleon. He's like, crap, I got to concentrate on this. I need money for that. I need money for my European conquest. I have to focus on what's going on in Haiti. Let's just sell. So,
yeah. It creates a butterfly effect that then
yeah,
down the line creates the American superpower, American destiny, and everything else that comes from that.
beautiful. And obviously Lewis and Clark go on this expedition. There was a
Sure.
graphic novel, or it was comic books for a while. I mean, I have the graphic novels versions, but called Manifest Destiny. That it was kind of cool. It went Lewis and Clark go out west. They're sent by Jefferson, obviously, but it's the West is full of aliens and all these weird things, and they're supposed to discover it and bury all this supernatural stuff before Americans move in there. It was actually a really cool book,
That's what you
series
believe.
of books. Look at that.
So
You got
you're
me into
really
comic books.
you're
Now I'm
really
a
big
comic
into like
book.
disclosure and stuff like that.
Nope. What is
No,
that one?
that's a new movie with Steven Spielberg, I think, or something that
I did see a preview for that.
aliens are coming. So maybe it's all going to come out. Maybe Lewis and Clark were really aliens. Could happen.
Yeah,
Never
yeah.
know. Never know. Clip
So
that. Putting that out there.
I know. A brief word from our sponsors. History is long, complicated, and most of us don't have time for it. And that's where I come in. I'm Peter Zablocki, historian, professor, and slightly obsessed storyteller. Every single day, I dig up forgotten stories from the past. And then I squeeze them into short, punchy episodes you can finish before your coffee gets cold. Big history, tiny time commitment. This is History Shorts. New episodes every day. Part of the History Shorts Network, available wherever you get your podcasts. So on my list, I mean, we're saying we're going to do 10 and 10 events, but this is probably going to be a little bit more or less in each one, because I know I have one that you did not have. I had War of 1812 as the second war for independence. And I know on your list where you were looking, that was not part of it, but I feel
I
like the
put on
War
my
of
honorable
18,
mention. I put on my honorable mention.
you did. I mean, I feel like War of 1812, it's such a, I don't want to call it stupid war because obviously people died and it's not, that makes it not stupid. But at the same time, this is a war that literally did absolutely nothing that
Well,
it potentially set out to do, except there is this effect of it, almost a byproduct of it that becomes so much more important than what happens in the war in itself. And the byproduct being that Americans feel proud to be Americans. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, bring
the
some
byproduct.
patriotism, right?
Yeah.
That's when the Star Spangled Banner gets written, so it definitely
Yep.
affects America, but it kind of like a lot of people say it solidified American independence
Yeah.
because there was a chance that Britain could have just came in and kind of taken us all over again, but we were able to more or less get a tie in it for the most part, right? The most
Yeah.
famous wins that we got happened after the war was already over. But it just proved that, all right, America, you're a country now, and you kind of got some of not some of the respect of the people of the world. Well, at that
Yeah.
point, I guess they said, oh, America's won their independence, but it was really the French helped them
Yeah.
win the independence. Now we kind of did it ourselves, and Britain was like,
Although I
okay,
would be
fine,
very
you're a real
curious.
country.
Wouldn't you be curious how the Brits look at this? Because they were fighting with one hand behind their back, like one eye covered. I mean, they just fought against Napoleon. They were like, "What,
Okay,
America?
well,
Okay."
if they want a rematch now, they can. That's all.
Oh
If
man,
they
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like starting it up again, if they
Things
want a
have
rematch,
changed. Things have
that
changed.
that's fair. You know what I mean?
I
Whatever,
love that.
whatever.
I love that. So, what was your next one besides War of 1812?
My next one, my number 5 was actually in 1823. That was the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah, that's a big
So
one. That's still, I mean, that's still big today.
it feels today, and it kind of got like reestablished today a little bit, right?
Yeah,
With like
after
Venezuela and
Trump.
stuff like that. Trump actually
Yeah,
talked about the Monroe Doctrine when everything happened in Venezuela. So it's basically when President Monroe warns Europe, stay out of Americas. The Americas are off limits to you. Western Hemisphere is an American territory. You do what you want in east in on the Eastern Hemisphere, right? In Europe and everything, but we're handling North and South American continents. And we begin to act like a major power, which kind of a really ballsy thing to do because we don't have really anything to really back it up at the
yeah,
time. Britain actually helped us enforce it for a while. That's kind of those like, you're like fun facts you can look up in history. It was more of a bold vision and empty threat than anything else. But it really was our first step to becoming having major global influence was saying Western Hemisphere off limits, that's American territory.
yeah. And at the same time, when you it really stems this butterfly effect. It stems from the fact that you have all these Latin American
Yeah.
revolutions.
Revolutions
So
popping
all
up.
these Latin American
They're like,
countries
we're going to be
are
the ones in
gaining.
charge of them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gaining their own independence from Spain, Portugal, the different European countries. And there is this fear that they're going to these European nations going to come back to try to reclaim it. So we're like, wait a second, this is going to disrupt our shipping. This is going to disrupt um, mainly shipping, right? But also
Yeah.
we don't want major powers reestablishing here.
It's
So
going to cost us money. We don't want any of these countries becoming too strong in our backyard.
yeah, but
They
I
saw
think
what
it is
happened in
also
Europe. They don't want to
yeah,
happen here.
this fits into this American experiment primarily because it really establishes U.S. foreign policy for until now. This is when it comes to the Western Hemisphere, our foreign policy of eventually Roosevelt's corollary and becoming a police power for the Western Hemisphere. But this is the first time where the United States takes full responsibility for the Western Hemisphere. And while we're not quite backing it up with military action just quite yet,
It paves the
we
road for
are
that. It doesn't happen without that.
yeah, it doesn't happen without that. But and this is still here for this day. So
Mm.
we're saying America is a global power. America has influence around the world because it does today, right? It's one of the two major powers. You may argue the second power post Cold War world today, 2026, is probably China. Like China and the US are probably two biggest powers. But the United States, first time it asserts itself outside its borders is the Monroe Doctrine. So that's I think the importance of this particular event. We should have mentioned Washington's farewell address. I feel like that's a big one too when it comes to foreign policy.
Yeah, well, that also ties in a little bit with the Monroe Doctrine because we do say, all right, Western Hemisphere is ours, but like I said, Europe is yours. We're going to stay out of European backyard. And that ties in with Washington's farewell address, right? Stay out of European wars, which
Yeah.
we really try to do for the most part, World War One and then
Well,
World
yeah,
War
and
Two
we do, yeah,
changes,
for the most part.
changes all that. We just say, hey, you guys do what you're gonna do over there. We're not getting involved. Because
I mean, and
we're focused on what's going on in the Western Hemisphere.
Wilson got some flack for that. I mean, Wilson ran
Yeah,
on I will not.
it
Yeah,
wasn't popular. Yeah, it wasn't
no,
popular.
yeah.
Not at all.
So the next one I have, you also did not have. I had Jacksonian democracy
Well,
and
I have ties in a little bit with Jackson democracy. I think I focus more on
Matt.
events, and you
Okay.
might have bigger with themes.
Yeah, all right, so
You
what do
know,
you
because
have?
I had Indian Removal Act,
That's what I had. I was gonna say Jacksonian Democracy and
1830.
Indian Removal
Yeah.
Act. All right,
Yeah,
so what do
so
you
it's
got?
Indian Rule Act, which is blueprint of Jackson's Tony democracy, right? This
Yeah.
basically is when this is something that kind of gets pushed over a little bit with American history, but it's another one of those examples what we talked about before where they knew it was wrong. A lot of people knew it was wrong. Some people thought it was the right thing to do, I guess. But even Supreme Court ruled against it, right? This policy, but it happened anyway, where Native American tribes were forced westward. It opens land for settlement, but causes immense suffering, pretty much the beginning of the end of the Native Americans population out west. Supreme Court, like I said before, does rule against removal policies, but Jackson ignored the ruling. This is basically a famous thing, right? The Supreme Court made a decision. I want to see them enforce it. Jackson just
Yeah.
did it anyway. And it was kind of that looking back now, the expansion was important, but morally, was it the right thing to do? Obviously, it wasn't. You're driving these people off their lands, right? Creates a trail of tears. And it's really debatable, too, like how this should be remembered. Because when you look at Manifest Destiny, a lot of times you said like Lady Liberty looking over the land of the wagon train and stuff like that. And it really, that happens, the wagon trains and going west, but it happens because all the Native Americans were kind of already forced off their lands prior to that under the Indian Removal Act and relocated to their reservations.
Yeah. I mean, he's really the first Jackson is the first populist president, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And
that's why it's just showing democracy, yeah.
yeah, and by being this first real populist president, he's uniting the people behind the common goal of the common man and land for the common man and the ability to rise up. It really, I mean, you could compare it to the idea of Trump being a populist president. This is very similar, different, obviously, but similar in the sense that you're looking at telling people you're going to make their life better. Like this was the
Yes.
version of make America great, not great again, but
It's
great
great to
by
start off with, yeah, the first time.
exactly. To give people land, to give them the ability to grow their wealth and their thus with it, comparatively, their social status. Like if people have land back then, people have social status. People have the ability to vote. So the Indian Removal Act, when they wind up relocating 5 tribes, I think it was 5 tribes, they're relocating these 5 tribes. And this is a big argument we have in history classes. And I'm sure you did it too in your classes is, well, is that an extension of Jacksonian's democracy or is that curtailing democracy? Because it's most certainly taking away all forms of democracy for the Native American people. But it's done in the name of granting more democracy to the white people, right? To the white American population.
Which is the only ones that had the right to vote back then, right?
Exactly. Right?
So, yeah, it's one of those things like, could America have grown separated from this displacement of Native Americans? Like, if
Yeah.
that didn't happen, does America grow the way that it does? Right or wrong, does that still happen? So those are like some of those questions too that are always asked, debated, explored. That's what makes social studies,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know, it always gets me this idea of his for better or for worse, this guy obviously, I mean, we have
Well, you changed America. I
ethnic
mean, without the
cleansing. We have this is ethnic cleansing. I don't know, there's no better way to put it. But he's doing this in his own mind, thinking that by expanding this land west and making more land available to the common man, he will rise or like raise up the common man, the common American, and make America great. You make the argument he basically doesn't think Native Americans are Americans, which is you
no,
know
he doesn't. Yeah, yeah.
you know yeah. All right, what's the next one you have? I have Manifest Destiny and like Mexican
Well, that
American
kind of
War.
well, that ties in a little bit. I had the Treaty of Hidalgo, right,
Yeah.
which ends the Mexican American War. And when it ends, it basically cedes vast territory in the United States, creates modern Western America, right? New Mexico, you get Nevada, you get all those parts of you get California. And then gold was discovered just a few days before the treaty is signed, right? So you get all of this new land, rich land, gold. And it was really America's first imperial war. It was the expansion of Manifest Destiny, right?
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And it also then creates something that they're gonna have to deal with, right? The whole expansion of slavery also. And now it's a major debate in slavery. We got all these new territory. We're gonna carve these new territory into states. What type of states are they gonna be? Are they gonna be free states or slave states? That's gonna upset that balance. So you can argue that
Yeah,
this treaty made the Civil War inevitable.
yeah. I think when you think of, like, the Civil War, it's such a slow burn. Like,
Oh yeah.
you can't
Yeah,
say,
but
like,
you
"This is
can
what
look at
started
it
the
and
Civil
find
War."
and you can look at it and know that I mean the seeds of it were planted before the country was a country, right?
Literally. It was
But you
planted
can
with 2
also say
ships. One went to
yeah,
Plymouth, one went
yeah.
to Jamestown. Boom.
Yeah, you could even argue, that it was the seeds were planted in 1776, the seeds were planted with the sign of the Constitution 1789, the seeds were planted, obviously, after all these treaties. Whenever, as our country's growing, it's just still that it's always being pushed back. We'll deal with that later. We'll deal with that later. We'll deal with that later until 1861. You can't push it back anymore.
Yeah.
And then it explodes.
If you had to break down the Civil War from long-term causes and then bring it to short-term causes, immediate causes, I think that the Mexican American War, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, that has to be more short-term causes, not immediate, but short-term
Well, because
causes
it's
because
close. It's close to the same time. A lot of the same generals that fought in the Mexican American War
yep.
are the ones that you see in the Civil War.
But
Grant,
also
Lee,
think of
all
all
of them,
the
they don't
issues
know each
that
other. Sherman.
Yep, but think of all the issues you just mentioned. The Civil War, the road to the Civil War starts from Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. We get the oldest land, right? Gold's
Yeah.
discovered, and now you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, all right, do we extend the Missouri Compromise line? Can we allow slavery? Wilmot Proviso, whatever, right? You can should we allow slavery to go north? Should we not allow slavery to go north? And California wants to be admitted as a free state. All these things spiral from the fact that we gain all this new territory.
Yeah. So
And
quickly. Yeah.
very quickly. I mean, think about it, from 40s until like barely 20 years, and we're at Civil War. So it's like we hold off for almost 100 years of compromise after compromise. And then in 20 years, we're just after this war, it's done. But there is one compromise within that, which is the Compromise of 1850. I mean, I guess I don't know if this is an honorable mention because I think you could roll that in with like coming of the Civil War, but the Compromise of 1850 was important for the sheer fact that California was admitted as a free state, but you have the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act, which essentially made slavery a federal institution because it said that prior to the Compromise of 1850, if a former slave or a former if a slave
They say it's
escaped
escaped. Yeah.
yeah, escaped as far as just Pennsylvania. If you're in Philly, right, you're free because you're in a free territory. But now with the Fugitive Slave Act, the Southerners have the right to send bounty hunters into the
Go
North
get them.
to
Yeah.
reclaim you, which
They have
means you're not.
federal. Yeah. They have federal
Yeah,
authority to do that, which they didn't
exactly.
have before. So that goes into also what the whole debate of state rights versus federal rights.
Yeah,
But this is an example that state rights, federal rights trump state rights.
yeah,
That's one of the
yeah.
examples of
Because
that.
the state's like, oh, we don't believe in slavery, but the federal law, the Fugitive Slave Law, allows federal government protects the right for a slave owner from the South to go anywhere in the North to take their slave back, an enslaved person, which essentially made slavery a federally protected institution, which is kind of intense. And again, that happened just what 10, 11 years before the Civil War starts. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it lays out the groundwork because everyone's people who support it are like, "This is great. Now we can go and get the slaves," basically. But the people who hate it are now saying, look what you're doing. You're giving more power, and you're actually going to spread slavery now."
yeah, yeah. Manifest Destiny kind of gets, I guess, Mexican American War gets rolled in with Manifest Destiny. And the next thing I have is a bunch of things that fall into the Civil War. I don't know how like your research did that.
I have an event of the Civil War that kind of changes Civil War, right? You can argue Fort Sumter that starts the Civil War, but what I put down there was in 1863, actually, the Emancipation Proclamation, right?
Mhm.
Because Lincoln declares all the enslaved people in a Confederacy territory free, right? But what
Yeah,
this does is this changes the purpose of the Civil War.
yeah,
So now there's no way that European powers are going to get involved. Now it's truly going to remain a civil war, right? Yes, it didn't immediately free all enslaved people. That's a lot of people think this is what freed the slaves. It's not. It was
yeah.
more
It
of a
did not.
military. It was a military act, and you can argue was Lincoln doing this more of a military necessity or moral decision. That's why he's one of those debates. But it shows his evolution because he now said his war is also being fought to free the slaves, and it created a huge international impact because it kept European powers out of the war. And it really like solidified now this war is being fought to end the institution of slavery in the United States.
Yeah. And we should touch upon this idea because you mentioned that you kept Europe out of war. The Confederate States of America were
They were banking on that.
banking on that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
They're like
Because
Britain
they
needs
thought
cotton. Yeah.
exactly. They're like Great Britain is never going to give up the cotton that we give them.
They were getting it
And
from the North instead. Like
yeah,
it just
but it also well, Great Britain was like, screw that. We'll just grow cotton in India. I mean,
yeah. Yeah.
that's ultimately what they did, right? I mean, they controlled so many colonies. So as opposed to fighting, but for a hot second there, I mean, it was
There
kind
was
of in
debate.
limbo.
They had some support. They sent some delegates to European powers and they were trying to get them involved. And I think there was some, and Lincoln realized that. That's why they're saying this was more of a military decision at some points.
Yeah.
Also because then if like, if the African Americans, rebelled or if they escaped and they could join the Union Army, it allowed a lot of people, but it also gave that moral justification for the war now. So
Yeah. But even the way he did this was so tricky because there was one general that freed the slaves. He went into, I forgot the specifics, but went into an area in the South and proclaimed all slaves free. And he was reprimanded by Lincoln because the key here was that we needed something substantial, such as a win, because
yeah.
the Union forces were losing a lot,
Well, he
to
wanted to do this
back this
earlier.
up.
Yeah, yeah. He had to wait for
Uh,
well, it was Antietam. He waited for Antietam.
yeah. And then Tatum was talking about turning points of the Civil War. I mean, I guess the Union won Antietam, but I don't. I mean, there's so
I
many
think
losses on both sides.
what Antietam shows is it shows what's going to happen later on in the war. That even if the North doesn't win the battle, or if the North barely wins the battle, if it's a tie, the South is still going to lose because the North can replace those men,
Yep.
and the South can't.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to really, and Antietam really shows that. And I think Grant really sees that. And then they kind of like, all right, we're gonna just gonna constantly engage. And if we lose 10,000 and they lose 3,000, we can replace that 10,000. They can't replace that three.
There's a
And
really
that's really starts
awesome
to become it.
there's a really awesome museum in Richmond of the Civil War. It's cool. It actually stemmed there used to be a Confederate museum, obviously, in Richmond for the longest time. And about like 20 years ago or so, some people are like, yeah, maybe this is just not a good idea. So
Probably
they
not.
like
Probably not.
rolled it in. Yeah, they rolled it in with Union stuff and it created a general Civil War museum. It's a really, if anybody wants to check it out, I highly recommend it. It's really cool if you are ever near the Richmond area. But yeah, I mean, the Civil War itself is a humongous event because
Well, yeah. I mean, you're not gonna. That's probably the most pivotal event in American history, the
period.
Civil War,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it changes the country, it ends slavery, changes the country. It strengthens the federal government, right? Also, but it also creates the backbone for all the race relations you're going to have, and it's what leads to the civil rights era. Things we'll talk about, obviously, in our
Next
second
episode.
half. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so you could make the argument. There's a US before Civil War, there's US after Civil War. There's not many countries in the world that have a Civil War. I mean, for us, we're so far removed from it that for us, it's these guys on horses and bugles and so far. But Civil War, just the very sheer idea of Americans killing Americans. I mean,
Yeah.
I go down south, I go to Florida, I visit places. I can't imagine seeing people as enemies to the extent that I'm willing to shoot at them. Like these are Americans. I don't.
I just showed how split the country was,
Yeah,
at that time.
it's just
And also
insane.
how things got out of hand because no one really thought it was going to happen and no one thought it was going to last as long as it did or it was going to be as bloody as it did. But
Well, yeah. Well, Lincoln never even acknowledged the fact that Confederate States of America existed. He always
it was
referred
just
to
a
them.
rebellion. Well, yeah, because they
Yep.
were never a country. It was just a rebellion. And I
Yep.
think that goes in with my next topic. My next one I picked was in 1860 was the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yep.
Obviously, that's where he's brought up, but I can't have talk about Civil War American events without Gettysburg because that does end the rebellion essentially. Like Lee's invasion of the North is defeated. It's a major turning point. It's the largest battle on American soil. It's a 3-day battle over 50,000 casualties. I would say it's the most important battle in American history because it can change everything. If Lee wins, that changes everything. The South probably wins some form of independence, right?
Yeah.
Probably could be another
Lee
one on.
wins. Think about it. If Lee wins,
They take DC.
yeah, he stays up north, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
would say if he wins, he likely stays up north and continues, and yeah, maybe even goes towards DC.
Well, the war drags on a lot longer at the very best for the North. You know what I mean?
Yeah. An amazing, a really awesome battlefield. If anybody wants to visit, battlefield of Gettysburg is awesome. But that battle is studied in military history
Oh, to this
courses
day, yeah, Pickett's
around the
charge and
world.
yeah, little
Yeah.
round top. It's still analyzed and dissected because of just everything that was going on. Because this is not just a battle that lasted a couple hours. This is a 3-day battle. Like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really like there's some lull, I guess, in the fighting, but not that much. They were just fighting for 3 days straight. I'm really surprised there weren't even more casualties.
Do you have the number of casualties? I
It was
don't.
over 50,000. I remember seeing them once. The actual number was somewhere around 63 something.
You
That's
know
what I
what is
remember.
also
I don't remember.
forgotten? If you look at military stuff, what is often forgotten is Vicksburg, which happens within
Yeah,
days of Gettysburg,
days
and
of
it's
Gettysburg. Yeah.
overshadowed by Gettysburg.
Gettysburg, yeah, yeah. Well, that's what happened. I remember teaching the Civil War back in the day, and I'd always be like, up to this point, this was the bloodiest battle in American history. And I would say, oh, this one, and then this one, and Shiloh, Antietam, Gettysburg, Vicksburg, Gettysburg. And my students like, Mr. Reszka, you just keep on saying every battle's the bloodiest one. I'm like, well, that's what it was up to that point. There's another one like 3 weeks later that's even worse. And they're like, oh, that's not cool. Well, that's what it was. You know what I mean? It's on a record you want to break.
Yeah, no. But Vicksburg, I feel like Vicksburg's a big one too. I had a book of turning
Yeah, well,
points in the Civil War.
yeah, and back-to-back losses for
Yeah,
Confederacy. Yeah, it just
100%.
that they're done. They're done. Like they still existed
Yeah.
to fight for another 2 years, a year and a half, whatever, but they weren't really like able to continue on. There was no chance of winning.
Well, I
Zero.
feel like the psychological and physical destruction of Sherman's march, in '64.
Well, that yeah, but you can't have Sherman's march without Gettysburg.
Gettysburg. Yeah.
You're
Agreed.
driving Lee back at that point,
Agreed.
and you destroyed the entire mystique of Lee being unbeatable.
I was always curious what happened to Lee. I looked this up a couple times after the war. I know he didn't really wanna talk about the war. I remember reading that.
But yeah, remember,
Like,
if
and
you
I think
us
he
others
became
felt
didn't
he
he become
wasn't.
a president of some school? I wanna say he
Yeah,
became
yeah,
president, so I have to look it up.
he became a president, a founding president of school, and he really didn't have he just kind of, like, lived this he didn't live that much longer, I
No,
don't
I
think,
don't think
either.
so.
He didn't live that
Yeah,
much longer after the war.
nuts. So, I mean, Reconstruction is probably gonna start us off on our next episode, but I mean, we could roll it in here a little bit. I for me, there's a lot of things happening around this centennial. We're doing this as America 250, but in 1876, around like give or take 5 years back and forth, right? A lot of stuff is happening. I mean, you obviously have the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition, which is celebrating 100 years, but Little Bighorn happens in 1876, right?
Mm.
Like,
Yeah, but that's not really,
shocking.
like, American that I know what you're
Yeah, I don't
saying,
think
like,
that changes.
it's well
Yeah,
known, but it doesn't identify America, it's kinda just becomes synonymous with, like, westward expansion again,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. Or last stand, you might say, of Native
Yeah,
Americans.
famous last stands, that, like, the Alamo, all those
But
things.
Hayes Tilden ticket,
Mm.
backroom the idea of compromise of 1877, shortly after, which ends Reconstruction, because I feel like ending Reconstruction meant giving up on Reconstruction, which meant the birth of Jim Crow laws. Do you know what I mean? Which then means,
Lays
uh,
the foundation for, yeah, everything that
well,
happens in
eventually
the
civil rights movement. Yeah,
civil rights movement. It takes another 100 years, yeah.
exactly. So I would say that Reconstruction that comes to play after the Civil War when the South is divided into military districts, that in itself was it was a patch because the only reason why you have African Americans being elected into office during that time is because there is a military occupation of the South. Like the hardcore Confederates are not standing up against them, and it allows for freedom to actually blossom. It also allows, Eric Foner argued, it allowed for the passage of the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. Those
Super
amendments would
huge,
never
yeah,
pass.
no.
They would never pass in a Congress that was united with the North and South, not during Reconstruction. So Reconstruction from that standpoint is successful because it creates this foundation, these foundational
Yeah,
laws.
Reconstruction starts off very successful,
Yeah.
and then it loses a lot of steam. That's basically
Well,
what
yeah.
happens. I think a lot of it was put in place too because Lincoln was assassinated, and they wanted to kind of honor his legacy.
Yep.
That's what things he wanted, alright, and he was such a popular opinion because Lincoln was really not popular until he was assassinated,
Yeah.
and then people were like, "Alright, he actually was, like, doing great things for the country." So, that kind of ushered in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and then as time went on, yeah, like, it just became politics got involved, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and that well, that's why I'm saying, by
Yeah,
the centennial is 1876, but
yeah,
you have this is when the election's going on. By 1877, when you have this compromise, where essentially Hayes-Tilden election, when you have it's considered the most disputed election
yeah,
until the 2000 election, where you have this idea of a racist Democrat was about to win the presidency, and the Republicans couldn't deal with it. So they're like, "No, no, no, we need a Republican in office." So they're like, "All right, well, you could have Hayes in office, but you get all the troops out of the South."
the troops lead the South, and without the troops protecting in the South, yeah, the Jim Crow laws can go into effect, and yeah.
Yeah. So what's the big last one you have?
I
Or do
went
you have
actually a
2
little
more?
bit before that. No, I'm on
Oh,
my
go.
last one. A little bit time wise, in 1869, and connecting everything together. Literally, is the transcontinental railroad is completed.
Yep.
So you have the rail lines connect east and west, And this totally transforms the United States because it transforms travel, trade, settlement. Obviously, Chinese immigrants played a major role, and a lot of them like stay, and that creates a lot of Chinese immigration. We have this country to this day, but it creates America's first truly national economy because it just connects everything, right? And it shows how technology can change society, which is like a major thing that happens. And obviously, just looking at how technology just shifts now every 5 years, this thing, how what things happen. But this is probably the most important technology or infrastructure project in American history. We complete these rail lines that connect east and west, so you can actually get goods back and forth. Now, it still takes a huge amount of time by today's standards, but by 1869 standards, this is like you'd be getting whiplash. So
But it also seals the fate of Native Americans because it
yeah, yeah.
wipes
Now,
out the
now they're
buffalo herds, wipes out the buffalo herds.
yeah. People really
Uh,
shooting from the rail cars. Yeah,
yeah, you have Easterners, you could take a trip out west and shoot. They would literally just shoot a buffalo from, like you said, from a train car,
yeah.
and the train would never stop, and the buffalo would just sit there. It's such a waste, but it definitely seals the fate of Native American tribes because of the fact that it opens up easy access, or
Yeah,
easier, I
settlement,
should
easy
say.
access. Troops can get there faster,
Yep.
so yeah. It shows that they even if they were on their homeland or whatever, they didn't have the technology to compete with this new group that was coming in.
I saw somewhere where it said the Transcontinental Railroad is the making of America and the unmaking of the indigenous
Yeah,
nations, America. You know what I mean?
that's
Like,
modern America. Yeah, gets rid of old America, right?
yeah.
Old world, old new world, and brings in the new world.
What are some, did we mention all your honorable mentions?
I had a couple more honorable mentions that I think could have gone in this town. We did talk about like Jamestown a little bit, right? We talked about Mayflower Compact, Washington crossing the Delaware. I know we talked about War of 1812 was one. The only other one that we didn't mention a little bit that I thought could have been thrown in there, but I guess it becomes a bigger arm. It's like the Seneca Falls Convention. That was
Yeah.
1848.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it
Now
does
we have to
launch the
mention that.
women. It does launch the women's rights movement, but the debate is obviously the 19th Amendment matters a lot more than Seneca Falls. But you don't get 19th Amendment without Seneca Falls, probably.
Yeah. And,
So
what's also
it's a
interesting,
major
people
event.
yeah. What people don't realize is that certain states, including our state, I mean, New Jersey was the first
Yeah,
state to really give women the right to vote, in 1700s, and then they took it away afterwards. They're
took it
like,
away. Yeah,
"Ah, no." But the right to vote for women started on a state level. And when the 19th Amendment is passed in 1920s, it basically makes a law that was present in many areas a federal law. And women can now vote for federal politicians as well, as opposed to just state. But it does create this. The 19th Amendment is almost like a culmination of states' rights, and states' rights and the right to vote for women really starts at a local grassroots level, which is something like the Seneca Falls Convention, right? Where you had women's rights often tied themselves to abolitionist rights. They always came kind of hand in hand
hand in
throughout
hand. Yeah,
American history. Slavery's abolished, but women don't, right? Think about it. Slavery's abolished in the 1860s, and yet for women, they need another 60 years
yeah.
to gain that
There's
same right to vote.
not until 1920.
Craziness. I think that's pretty much it. I don't have any other ones for
No, I think
125
that's good.
years.
I mean, the people are gonna be like, "Oh, you forgot this, you forgot that." Yes. You know what I mean? We're just
Yes, yes.
we're only supposed to do a couple here, like, try
You
to put
forgot,
everything together.
yes, yes.
Yes, we did. Like, that's there's no argument there. That's what it's gonna be.
Um,
But overall, we hit the major ones. We hit the high flyers.
that's right. Well, if anybody needs to find us, you guys can find us. You could honestly just Google us, but we're also on social media. We are pretty active on Facebook. So you could just search for History Teachers Talking on Facebook. And that's probably the best way to contact us because you guys could send us messages and suggestions and everything else directly through the messaging. Good. I hope you guys are enjoying these new 2.0 episodes because I know we are excited in recording them. And also look for us on YouTube. Perhaps some of you are already watching this on YouTube, but if you are, make sure you click that subscribe button and just look out for all of our new videos and YouTube shorts. You got anything else?
Thanks for the support. Any ideas or any, feedback is always, appreciated. Just, stay nice.
Stay nice.